Alright, we got a 2007 Jeep Wrangler, 3.8 liter, doing an engine swap. We got a bad crankshaft going, so I have an engine knock. Always tight again. So up and down is tight. Left to right is egged. 2.24 at its thinnest point. .27. You roll it around. Let's go back to the... Alright, so we got 3.8 liter 2007 Jeep. What we're gonna do first, watching a bunch of videos online, not that there's many, but from what I've found is take off the upper manifold first, or intake manifold. So this way there's two screws on the back of the engine that connect the transmission to the engine itself. Apparently you can't get to it. From what I'm seeing is it's easier to take off the upper manifold. It takes about, I don't know, 20 minutes, half hour, rather than trying to drop the transmission and do all that. Don't know whether or not it's going to work. You know, I may have to drop the transmission a little bit as well, but I'm going to start with this section, see how it takes me, and then move from there. Apparently I could just move all these kind of things back, what's it called, steering pump back, AC pump, instead of removing everything. I think I can just take it off and kind of bring it to the side. I'm going to take off basically all my hoses in general. There's one or two videos that show how to take off an intake manifold if you put it on YouTube. We're going to start with that. What else? So we're taking off this. I'm going to label each one of my connectors, electrical harnesses as I go. I'm going to take off this. Going to undo, you know, basically start with the top. Again, there's a what's called video online that if you put in YouTube, you'll be able to find. It's like a 10-part video. The guy was redoing his entire engine. Okay, so you start by draining the radiator, open up here. There's a little plastic pitcock right in here. Go to the front of the engine. Okay? So drain right out. Alright, so we're going to start. Obviously, we're going to disconnect the battery so we don't get electrocuted. I went along, labeled a couple things. Come to the air box. Hose number 1. Back there. Hose number 2, what is that? Come in. This one here. Again, I'm definitely not a mechanic, but mechanically inclined enough. Running out of space on my phone. 3. This one. 4. Pretty obvious. 5 is this little connector here to the air box. 4 is 6. 6 comes to the alternator. Okay. 7 goes to the, looks like AC pump. 8. Let's see. AC pump also. 9. Let's see, we got 10, 11, and 12. Come to there. 13 is the power for the alternator. Okay. Back here we got number 14. I'm not going to number these. This is in the front section. Take off this square one, then take off that one down there. Okay. We're also going to start loosening up the bolts for the alternator. Some here. There's 2 back here as well. Trying to then do the EGR valve. After that, we're going to loosen up here. Apparently there's 8 bolts for the cap right here, 4 down this side, 4 down the other. The EGR valve, we may need to loosen up some things back here. I don't know if we'll be able to scooch this out of the way. In that video, it looked a little difficult. We're also going to remove the fuel line right here, from here to here. I'm going to try just connecting this back one. This looks connected to the whole engine, so trying to take off as minimal things as possible, because the more I take off, the more headache I'm going to have. So I'm going to just try to undo this connection. We got a stud for the EGR valve right back here. If you look and you follow down, you'll see the 2 bolts on the EGR valve itself. They look rusted to shit, so we know it's going to be an issue. I think we got to loosen up those in order to get the valve out. It's almost there. But all right, we got 4 bolts for the top, for the cover for the manifold. Got to take off this. Okay. There's also a vacuum line right back here. When you start wiggling it out, you can get your hand in, pop it off. In order to get the EGR valve off, inside here, right straight ahead, let's see, right there where my finger is, there's 2 bolts. I had to take the inside of the cover off. So I got over here, I got my EGR valve bolts with the bolt with the stud. Those are the bolts for the head of the manifold. This is for the inside of the wheel well. Plastic, just get in there with a screwdriver and rip the shit out of it. Okay, so to my understanding, in order to get the fuel rail off, you take off bolt 1, 2, what is it? I guess 3 and 4. Okay. Gonna undo all those little connections. 1, 2, 3, 4. Also got to take off those 2 bolts right there. That's for coming from the front. So you just pop that fuel rail off. We've undid the connections. We're gonna take the distributor, or whatever it's called, coil, off. There's those 2 bolts on the back that I was just pointing to. Okay. We got number 15 right here. It's attached to the fuel rail wires. Down here, everything's connected, so we're gonna take that one off. We're gonna start removing everything one by one. I'll be able to peel up. Your driver's side is a little harder to get to, so I'm gonna remove one, get my fingers in, remove here, get my fingers in, a little bit easier. All right, on these whole harness, wiring harness, number 15 and everything that's connected to all the fuel injectors. Follow this little wire down. Goes underneath, what is this, power steering box? Or not power steering box, power steering pump it looks like. Follow it all the way down there. You see it moving? There's a clip down there. If you remove that, this whole harness will then be able to pull up. That little wire I was talking about that I just connected, that I said was connected to 15 here, that went down all the way underneath the engine. I label it number 16. Okay, it was underneath what looks like, I believe it's a power steering pump. What I did, I came through the wheel well. I was able to get right in there. There's a little connection right at the tip of my finger. Literally, bottom of the air box just pulls right out. Literally just, tug it, jerk it back and forth a little bit. It'll help you get into your power steering pump and stuff like that. It'll make life literally 1,000 times easier. Alright, so we got over here for the power steering pump. We got, what is this? I think we're on number 16. goes power steering fluid. 17 over here looks like something from the radiator comes down to this portion. We got 18 over here, this little one. That goes, I don't know. This is one of the cooling or heating tubes. 18, and then 19, you'll see right here there's a metal little pipe connector that goes from the steering box over directly here. It's a pipe thing that runs all the way down the front, connects here. So we're going to take that off, disconnect these things for the power steering pump. Alright, when you undo the large one that attaches to the radiator, make sure you got the bucket underneath, because got plenty of coolant that's going to come drip out of there. So there's these little metal clips when you're trying to take the fuel rail off. So you just take with the screwdriver, just put it on. I already took this one off, but you just kind of just push it right off on both sides. Say looks like this. Okay. Alright, I don't know if there's a better way to drain this, but the amount of fuel that comes out of here, you kind of got to tug it, work it back and forth. There's these little blue little gaskets, so it's kind of a little suction in there. A lot of fuel, as you can see. Just pulled the fuel pump, the rail, up out to the side. Alright, so you got all these little bolts that go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bag a little, not difficult to get to. Just takes, extra second or so. I'm just going to take off these two bolts over here, and this whole intake manifold should come off. Alright, I was able to lift that out. Those two studs over here that I was talking about, that were on the distributor, or the two nuts, they're actually two studs. So I think they're 13 millimeter, no issue. This right here, this gasket, from what I've learned from the other videos that I watched, apparently it's very sharp on the back. We're trying to get to those two bolts on the back of the frame. Apparently, or not frame, the transmission. Apparently one of the guys cut his finger open real bad on this. So we're gonna pull this out. I don't know, I'll just get in there with a screwdriver and lightly pull it up. This is your lower intake lower intake manifold gasket. It comes at a whole set with a door last from AutoZone. Coming over here, here's your intake manifold. I'm going to just throw the bolts back in, just so this way I don't forget or lose where the things are. You may, while everything's out, before you put your new engine in. Here's your thermostat right here. It's easy enough to take out and replace. I just bought this one last year, so I'm just going to take this one out and swap it into the new engine because it's relatively new. Alright, so as I was just messing around with that little thing, it's pretty sharp. Wear gloves. Didn't get cut, but a little one. I took that off. The top end to the engine is there. So I'm getting a couple towels. What I'm going to do is just lay them down right in between. I don't know, I'm assuming that really can't get dirty. So I'm just going to cover up the area. There's two little bolts on that that metal gasket. One's here, one's in the back. It just holds it down flat. So just pull that off. And then I'm just going to cover this section, just keep it clean. Alright, so I threw a couple towels in between. They said it would take about 10-20 minutes to do this. The video I watched took them about 40. I don't know. Obviously they cut some pieces out. Took me about 3 hours to get to here. Could just be because I don't do this every day, so I don't really know. You know what I mean? I'm taking my time with it. Alright. Serpentine belt. Let's see. Start. Tension and pulley. Okay, so what we're going to try to do first, instead of disconnecting the AC lines, I'm going to try to just pull the whole AC out to the side. I know it's going to be an issue, but that's what we're going to try to do first, just so I don't have to recharge it. I may do the same with the power steering pump, not sure yet. Alright, so what we have to do, we have to take off the whatever it is, the inside of the fender, flare to plastic. I was able to, if I turn the wheel a little bit back and forth, I'm able to get to the bottom bolt of the what's that called, AC compressor. So in there I just got a couple long extensions. You could even, if you look, you could get the top bolt for the AC compressor and the rear bolt. There's 3 total there. I'm gonna try to keep everything connected. I'm just taking the mounting bolts off and just trying to pull everything to the side. Okay, so we're taking the starter out right now. Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit. I want you to remove the starter. Also, right underneath me, I disconnected the front drive shaft right here. I left it attached to transfer case, just disconnected it here. I just put a piece of tape around it so the bearings wouldn't come out. Also, there's a little bracket right here. Okay, that connects the transmission to the bottom of the engine block. You got 2 14mm bolts that are going to come here. Then you got, I believe it's 4 15mm bolts. Don't use the same size, Josh. You're going to strip them out. Good. Alright, now we got the starter out. There's a bolt over here, bolt on the other side. We're just trying to now separate the block from the transmission. I don't know how many are on the other side because my camera woman is over there. So we're going to find out. Okay, so what we got here, we got the connection for the downstream O2 sensor, as well as I believe this crankshaft positioning sensor here. We're going to disconnect both of these because if you follow, you can't really see, but if you follow those to the wiring harness, it goes and connects to this heat shield, which is in front of which is part of the engine block. So you're going to separate the 2 of those. Alright, so working on getting on the bolts, just going around the transmission, trying to get each one out. Takes some time. I did not have to drop the transmission or anything like that. Definitely took a while. I just had to baby it, you know, 1 click at a time on the ratchet. These 2 top ones, I'm literally sitting in the engine right now. 2 top ones took a while. With all this wire harness and crap like that, you constantly wiggle and move in and stuff. There's a little bracket right in here. I was able to get in with a wrench, undo the little bracket. That gave me a little bit more play with the wires. Once you get them in, one's about 1 o'clock or 12:30 if you're looking at a clock. The other bolt is about maybe 11:30, you know, right. There's 2 of them, one right about here, one right about there in the back. Again, it took some time, but they do come out. Alright, so I was able to move the fuel rail by disconnecting it. It's connected up to one of these. I was able to just pop it off, take that off. Here is my 10, 11, 12. From before that was hooked up to this. I was able to just lay it over in the front. Basically pushed everything just back and away as best as I could. Alright, so underneath, in between here on the passenger side, the bolt right under here, it's got a ground wire that comes around. Earlier when I disconnected the downstream O2 sensor, that same wiring harness, there's 2 what's it called, 2 things, you gotta pull them off. Alright, size 16. Also in that same spot where I was just saying with the ground, there's a ground wire right here, one of those little fray ones. And then see that little black thing right at the tip of my finger? That's a clip that needs to be unclipped. Alright. Oh, getting the engine out. So I ended up using I have a little John Deere tractor. I was using that last night. Alright, so we learned some stuff last night. Spent about 2 hours, 2-3 hours. It was getting dark. Trying to get the engine out, only because I ran into a couple small issues. Wasn't too bad. Mounting brackets there and here. So mounting bracket bolts, I was able to get the nut off fine, no issue. The nut side was nice and loose. I could get a pry bar in there and wiggle things around. However, the head of the nut on both sides, it was not frozen, but real solid, rusted together onto the front portion, right in this section where my finger is. Trying to move it, lifting the engine, dropping the engine, lifting the engine, dropping it 100 times, not 100 times, but a bunch of times. If you're having any issue, we got right in there with you see all the metal fragments on both sides. Get in there with a Sawzall, with a metal blade, get a couple of metal blades just in case you burn them out. Literally just cut the bolt. Don't try spending, wasting 2-3 hours, you know. I'm pretty sure if you're going to get another engine, there's going to be the mounting brackets there, mounting bolts there. Just cut the bolts, make life easy. Literally, if we would have done that right away, we would have saved ourselves easily an hour and a half. After that, I was having an issue because my, my exhaust. I thought I cut the bolts earlier. Turns out I only cut through halfway through one. Just make sure you cut it through every time I was lifting the engine up. Happened was the exhaust was coming with it. Cut that off, you know, took another minute and a half just to cut the bolt, not even. Everything came out fine. The issue I was having was I was trying to lift the engine, this and that, pull it in, pull it out. I was able to wiggle it in the bell housing back and forth, but it wasn't really coming off. Couldn't get it, couldn't wiggle, you know, enough of it. Make sure you get these mounting brackets, cut them and stuff like that. Engine came right out. Another thing, air conditioning pump. Tried pulling it off to the side. I ended up just having to cut it. Not cut it. Ended up having to disconnect it. 2 bolts here for your wires going to the air conditioning pump. Here and here. It was just too much of an issue, too much of a hassle, things like that. I'm gonna totally today just pull this whole thing, you know, take the wires off. Let's see, I might even take it off from back there, just make life easy. Actually no, I'll leave these on. Because then what was happening was the air conditioning pump was getting pushed up when I was trying to lift the engine out, which then it was starting to crush and rub on all these you know, my brake lines and stuff like that. Take the AC compressor out. It's cheap enough just to recharge a system. You know, you're doing an engine. Make life easy. Don't work harder. Also take out this fan shroud. So I said, I'll get plenty of room. I ended up a couple times, you can see a couple little scrape marks from the pulleys. I don't think I damaged the fan. I think everything's still fine and working. But that extra 4 inches or whatever definitely would have saved me a little bit, because I was trying to fight around that the entire time. Here's the bolts where literally just cut through, you know, right through the rubber, right through everything. Got the new engine here. Today we're going to be switching everything over. Another thing, when I lifted everything up, originally the way I was lifting, I lifted around here. It wasn't centered. There was too much of an angle going on, the way the engine was tilting, so I had to use a ratchet strap. Just brought it right around the the pulleys and stuff like that, just to level it out a little bit. Okay, so I'm here. Here's the old engine. There's a new engine. I was just gonna start swapping stuff over, things like that. Alternator. Noticing a lot of issues. Passenger side of the engine looks intact, looks fine to me. Now I'm looking here. Okay, this is cracked off. Back up. This has a crack in it here, for the AC compressor. Noticing it looks like the whole front timing cover. I don't know if these are taken off, loosened. I don't know if this is from a different vehicle. Or whatnot. Engine block where the mount is supposed to be, that's cracked off. Let's see, there's another crack here. Where else are we looking? Flywheel's a little bent and stuff, especially down around maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock. That's no longer around. Also, the block is an issue because now I can't even mount anything to it. This power steering pump is literally, not pump, power steering box is totally toast. So I'm gonna remove that today, and I got another one on offline cheap. Take out the bolts on there. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube, you know, drop the pitman arm, things like that. I'm gonna remove it. Just, it's easier for me when everything's out of the vehicle. Easier to do it now than to struggle and do it, you know, while everything's inside the Jeep. Alright, undid the power steering box. Over here, I'm just waiting on a Loctite right now. I'm supposed to get some more. Now we're gonna take out this the fan. Unhooks right here, okay? Or actually no, we'll unhook it from this one down here. Be careful, this little clip right here, be gentle with it. In the past I've had them crack off and stuff like that, so just be nice and gentle when you pull it off. I believe, where is there? There's a bolt here, okay, and then there's another one on the other side. If I remember correctly, there's only 2 bolts. This front portion here, you can literally just pull this out. It's not even in. Okay, so we got the new steering box in. I had to take the steering column out. So I noticed this in this rubber section is supposed to go in and out, kind of like a piston. It's seized, solid shut, nice and rusted. Also, I noticed right in here, I don't know if this happened last night or if this frayed over time or not. It kind of looks like it frayed and wore down over time. So I'm just gonna resolder that. Alright, so I just had the clutch done a year ago, year and a half, give or take. Found a little plastic thing just sitting down here. Not really sure where it goes. And I noticed on the bearing, definitely some back and forth play, as well as I don't know if that's supposed to be like that. I feel like it's supposed to be nice and tight. I believe we're just gonna pop this piece off here, pull the whole section out. I believe there's 2 clips, one on the back here, one on the back here, that the throwout bearing clips onto. Put new grease. Got a engine stand from Harbor Freight. There's the underside. Pretty good. It's like 50 bucks or 40 bucks. Just kind of turn it. Okay, so what we're gonna do first, I'm gonna take the water pump off. I'm gonna take a couple of pulleys. I'm gonna look at all the bolts. I'm gonna have to take this off. I'm leaving the alternator. I also think I'm gonna leave the power steering pump. I'm gonna try to leave everything on that I can when I take the timing chain cover off, just because it's that much less stuff I need to worry about putting back together. Once I get this on the other engine, I'll probably switch the alternator, stuff like that. I'm gonna wait a couple minutes to do this first. I'm gonna start with the timing chain, see how that gets me. Starting with the water pump, we're gonna take these 3 bolts off. Okay, you're gonna have to shove like a screwdriver in here. So this way it jams up so it doesn't spin. Underneath here, you're gonna notice there's gonna be bolts coming right around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, so I ended up snapping off 1 bolt. The others came off pretty easily. I'll probably just fill it with silicone for the water pump and then just send it and hope for the best. I'm gonna take off this. Then I'm gonna kind of start going around figuring out which bolts I could take out. I don't know. I'm gonna have to take the harmonic balancer off first. Alright, so I didn't have my harmonic balancer puller that I bought, universal one. Didn't fit. So what I did, I just took a regular gear pull, put it backwards, just like that. Something like that, pulled it off. Alright, when you're undoing the bolts, they're different sizes. You got 1, 2, 3, and 4. A little bit bigger. You can't really mess it up because these don't fit in the smaller holes. Alright, so right here there's one little bolt that you gotta get. It's a 10 millimeter. Also, I decided that I'm gonna take off the upper oil pan gasket. You don't necessarily need to take off this bottom one. It'll all just come right off. I'm taking off this upper oil pan gasket because in the front you got 2 little bolts, or yeah, bolts here. There's nuts on them. I just took them off, but in order to get the timing chain cover, I think I gotta pull everything straight out. So I'm gonna remove this first because it's gotta come off anyway. Alright, that's the inside of the timing chain cover. I'm gonna wait until tomorrow to kind of mess with all this, figure out what it is going on. Okay, so we got for the oil pump. There's the cover coming on. We're on the inside of the timing chain cover. Got right here. Gonna pull this top one out. Oh, I guess they both came out together. Put that way to the side. In here there's the little crankshaft gasket on the other side underneath. I'm just going to try popping that out. I have a replacement one, so I'm just going to clean this up and then put my new one back on. I'm not replacing the the oil pressure release. That's right in this section here. It's already in there. I'm not even going to worry about it. It's only a spring. Let's see, timing chain cover. I'm gonna make sure it's timed right and everything before I do put anything on. Right now I think I'm gonna take the headers off on both sides. Gonna spray the hell out of them. I'm most likely gonna need new bolts. They're probably all gonna snap off. Alright, headers came off pretty easy, only because it wasn't in the vehicle. I was trying to do it to replace the exhaust, so it would have been a nightmare. Now I'm going to take valve covers off. It's just some screws that we come around, boom, boom, boom. Real simple. Here, on the side, if you notice, this is a cylinder number, so 642 and then 315. So when you go to put your spark plugs back together, you know where you're going. So just realized that I have 2 engines. This one has 200,000 on it. That one over there only has 74,000. So I'm gonna end up using the EGR valve and a lot of stuff off the other engine just because it's newer. So I'm not gonna waste my time taking this stuff off this engine. I'll just take it off the other. But I'm gonna also do the EGR valve. I'll take off the other engine. Little thing here, I don't know what it is, but that I'm gonna end up swapping over. Tomorrow I'll worry about putting the timing chain cover back on, really getting everything down. There's no sense in my videoing taking the whole manifold off and getting the top of the other engine because we already did it once. Alright, just removed the clutch and flywheel off the old engine. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I made little arrows so this way everything would be lined up in the proper order. First you got the plate. You just got 4 bolts or 5 bolts, whatever it is. Clutch, you just kind of wiggle. I used the little pry bar, came right off. You got the flywheel, again, came right off once I undid the screws. Okay, so I switched everything over, pulleys, stuff like that, water pump, you know, the whole 9 yards. Switched everything over. Had to get a different bolt for my motor mount. And it's a little long, this one, but I'm going to use a couple washers to take up the space left and right. I also welded. I had little cracks in my headers, so I welded with a MIG welder, just kind of cleaning everything up. Now I'm going to put the flywheel on. Again, kind of switched everything over. Alright, little recap. Got the engine in place last night. The only reason I didn't video it, to me, I was pretty much just dropping it in. It took me about 2 hours or so. Had a little bit of an issue getting the engine mounts, or the motor mounts, lined up in the bracket. Took a little finagling, got it done with 2 people. wiggling it back and forth. Coupling it to the transmission went pretty smooth for the most part. I ended up using one of the bolts. Where is it? These are one of my bolts that I used for to hold the engine into the block. I ended up just taking a bunch of washers just to make up some distance. Kind of brought it in close together, as close as I could. Ended up, Ended up jamming up when I got it with about an inch or so apart. Backed the engine off the transmission, wiggled it around a little bit. I put a ratchet down on the, harmonic balancer. Turned the engine a couple of turns, just kept it free and loose. Tightened everything down nice and slow, left and right, left and right, left and right, those two bolts. Ended up just keep turning this every little bit. Ended up working out. I got it together, got the other bolts in. What we did was we put underneath on the transmission itself. I don't know why I'm coming down here. But we jacked up the transmission a little bit just to make the angle the same. So this way it would match the same angle as the engine, up and down. Again, it took a couple hours, but it went in. It was pretty smooth. I bought a clutch tool online, just an alignment tool. Just put that in. This was before I even had the engine in the, when it was still hanging, before I even put it into the motor. Just made sure the clutch was lined up with everything. No real issue. Ended up doing the motor mounts, tightening everything down today. Tightened up all 4 bolts, or 6 bolts, whatever it was, for the transmission to meet up with the engine. Tightened all those down. Don't know what the torque spec was, so I just made them as tight as I could. Then I went around, I kind of started watching all my videos in reverse, just putting things back together the way they started. Started out first, underneath here on the passenger side, underneath the heat shield that's behind the exhaust. I ended up putting those couple ground wires and a couple connections I had to click back together, the oxygen sensor, things like that. Ended up tightening all that down, putting back the heat shield. Before I did any of that, before I put the heat shield on, I tightened down my motor mounts just because I knew everything was already set, and just started plugging things back together little by little. Started putting my hoses back on slowly. I'm going to leave this out until the end. Just give me a little bit extra room to move around. Intentionally leaving my spark plugs out and stuff for right now. You need to prime this engine because it's brand new. The used engines, I don't know if you have to or not. But because this is a remanufactured one, what they say, you could either hook it up to some system and pump it out. What I ended up doing was what I'm going to do is, when I have the engine back together, I'm not going to put the spark plugs in. I'm going to turn the key, the ignition, stop it, turn it, stop it, turn it, stop it, turn it, stop it. Apparently that starts priming the engine. I think you're supposed to do it for about 2 minutes or so. There are directions in the engine, whatever, the box where everything came. So when I get to that point, that obviously won't be yet. I'll worry about that. Now what I'm just gonna do, I'm pretty much almost done. I just gotta put my manifold back on. I'll wait until the weekend to do that. It's Memorial Day right now. This came off the other engine. I ended up not having to separate the fuel rail and stuff like that. I was able to just get in on an angle, little by little, get those things out. I took the top off the cover, but everything else, fuel rail and the connections, I left on. We're gonna see, hopefully it goes back in. Also, I hooked the exhaust back up, put the starter back in, I put the drive shaft back in. Basically just started, like I said, doing everything in reverse. I started with the bottom portion of the engine, working my way up to the top. Just what I chose to do. That's why I release it. Okay, here we are a couple days later. Notice a lot of oil leaking and stuff. I lost about 2 quarts of oil, 1.5 quarts of oil over the last day. Right now I ended up, my crankshaft seal ended up being bad. Looks from here, looks like it got folded. So that was the front of it. It was sitting on that way, coming like that. Looks like it got folded over. I don't know, maybe you're supposed to put this in after you put the timing chain cover on. I was struggling trying to get the timing chain cover on. It was heavy and twisting this and that, so I may have just folded, you know, folded those 2 little pieces over. I don't know. So got a new one here. This came with the engine. It looks pretty similar. All right. Minor little differences. There's 3 grooves here where this one only had 1. I don't know if it makes a difference. It was in the case. I'm gonna put it in. Easy enough to get to. Just like you did before, you get the gear pull. Get it in, put it in backwards, pull everything out. What I did was I pulled out the top of the airbox, okay, and then the fan cover, just to get in there with the impact gun, stuff like that. Then pried it out the thing with, I pried out the seal with a screwdriver. Now I'm just going to lubricate this one and put it back in, make sure it's nice and flush, tap around the edges lightly, and put everything back together just like we did in the video earlier. Okay, so we're charging the vacuum system. We also got to finish doing this seal. Charging vacuum seal, you need a vacuum pump as well as the manifold gauges. Okay, so you got a high pressure and a low pressure system. These are each different sizes, so there's no possible way you can make it mess it up. This port, this male end and female end are a different size than that male and female end. You want to make sure these are closed. So this on the top counterclockwise, make sure both are closed. Up here on the gauges, we'll make sure everything's closed as well. So clockwise and clockwise. Okay, I'm literally just gonna hook everything up, hook the hose up to the vacuum. There's a good YouTube video on here how to do it. Okay, now what you do, you're gonna turn this on. Here you go, you got the pumps on right now. We'll come over, you're gonna open up here. Ready? Open this system. Okay, so those are open. Come back around. Right now the gauges are at 0. When I open this one, it should hear the pump go on. The other side. Okay, so I let it run for about an hour with the vacuum on. They said you only need to do it for a couple minutes. I just did a little excessive. What we're gonna turn this off here. Turn this off. And then we're gonna come over. We're gonna shut off the vacuum. I'm gonna let this sit for about an hour. I want to make sure that that maintains down at 0 by the green -1 down there. I want to make sure I'm holding the vacuum. Okay, so I forgot to finish the AC video, but there's plenty of videos on YouTube that show how to do it. Had a leaky header. Ended up had to get a new one. And that's a new one on there. Just took everything off. Took a little while to just get everything in, but it worked. Here's how you find the leak. Come around the back. Put the shop vac on blow mode. Okay, so it's blowing the air out, not sucking. Put it in there. Show you on the good side. You just spray with some soap and water.